Captain Marcus Washington stood stunned in the crowded terminal as security dragged him away from his own cockpit. Passengers filmed while flight attendant Veronica Harding smirked, claiming he'd forged his pilot credentials. 20 years of spotless flying and now handcuffed because a white woman felt uncomfortable with a black man at the controls. Marcus had one call to make to someone whose voice would silence everything. When that call connected, Veronica's smile vanished. She had no idea who Marcus really was, or that her entire career was about to crash and burn. Who was on the other end of that life-changing call? Before we begin this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe in justice and equal treatment for everyone regardless of race, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on more powerful stories that expose the truth. Captain Marcus Washington arrived at Denver International Airport 3 hours before his scheduled departure to Boston, just as he had done for the past 15 years with Sky Nation Airlines. The early March morning carried a sharp chill, but Marcus walked with the confident stride of a man who had earned his place in one of America's most exclusive fraternities. As one of only 73 black commercial airline captains in the entire country, Marcus knew his presence in the cockpit remained an anomaly, a statistical outlier in an industry still dominated by white men. At 44, Marcus carried himself with military precision, a habit ingrained during his distinguished career at the Air Force Academy and subsequent years flying combat missions over hostile territories. His spotless record included over 12,000 flight hours and numerous commendations. Passengers and crew alike usually felt an immediate sense of security knowing Captain Washington was at the controls. Today, however, something felt different as Marcus entered the crew lounge. His regular co-pilot, Frank Chen, had called in sick with a severe case of food poisoning. The scheduling department had assigned him a replacement named Ryan Miller, a younger white pilot who had been with Sky Nation for only 3 years. "Captain Washington, I'm Ryan Miller, your first officer today." The young man extended his hand with a friendly smile. "I've heard great things about you. Some of the guys say you can land in conditions that would make other pilots abort." Marcus shook Ryan's hand firmly. "Let's hope we don't have to test that reputation today." He offered a warm smile, appreciating the seemingly genuine respect. As they reviewed the flight plan for Sky Nation Flight 657, Marcus noticed flight attendant Veronica Harding entering the room. At 38, Veronica had been with the airline for over a decade, but Marcus had flown with her only twice before. Something about her demeanor had always struck him as cold, but he had attributed it to her general professionalism. During the pre-flight briefing, Marcus outlined his expectations and safety protocols as he always did. "We're looking at some potential weather across the Midwest, so I want everyone prepared for moderate turbulence about 90 minutes into the flight." Veronica immediately interrupted. "Are we sure that's the right route? I flew yesterday, and the northern corridor was completely clear." Marcus maintained his composure. "The forecast has changed since yesterday. The jet stream has shifted south." Veronica nodded but made eye contact only with Ryan, as if the information would be more accurate coming from him. Ryan seemed to notice the slight but said nothing. "Any other questions?" Marcus asked. No one spoke up, but the tension in the room had subtly shifted. Something about Veronica's body language suggested skepticism rather than the trust that should exist between captain and crew. As they prepared the aircraft for boarding, Marcus noticed other small instances of disrespect. Veronica repeatedly directed operational questions to Ryan rather than to him, despite his captain's stripes clearly indicating who was in command. When the cabin crew brought coffee to the cockpit during preparations, Ryan received his exactly as requested, black with 1 sugar. Marcus's order of coffee with cream came black instead. "Sorry, I must have forgotten how you take it," Veronica said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No problem," Marcus replied professionally, though this was the 3rd time she had forgotten his preference while remembering Ryan's perfectly. While checking the systems, Marcus overheard Veronica speaking to another flight attendant just outside the cockpit door. They didn't realize how their voices carried through the partially open door. "I always get uncomfortable when they put these affirmative action hires in the captain's seat," Veronica said in a hushed tone. It's like they care more about diversity photos for their annual report than passenger safety. The other flight. Attendant's response was inaudible, but Veronica continued. I mean, I'm sure he's qualified on paper, but don't you wonder if they lowered the standards? Marcus felt the familiar weight he had carried throughout his career, the constant need to be twice as good, twice as professional, twice as perfect as his white counterparts. One mistake would not be seen as a human error, but as confirmation of incompetence, proof that he didn't belong. The weather in Denver deteriorated rapidly, causing a 90-minute delay for desing. The terminal grew crowded with frustrated passengers, and tension increased as connecting flights were missed. Marcus received several updates from dispatch, each requiring adjustments to their flight plan. As he worked through the revised calculations, his phone vibrated with a text from Harold Jenkins, his longtime mentor and the current CEO of Sky Nation. Marcus, be careful today. Hearing about trouble brewing. Watch your back. Marcus stared at the cryptic message, a sense of unease settling over him. In 20 years of flying, Harold had never sent him anything like this before. What exactly was he being warned about, and why today of all days? With the weather delay creating a backlog of departures, Marcus knew that once they were finally cleared, they would need to operate with maximum efficiency. Passenger patience was already wearing thin, and any further delays would only escalate tensions. He reviewed the new routing once more, noting that they would need to fly further south than originally planned to avoid a line of thunderstorms developing across the Midwest. The extra flight time would put some passengers dangerously close to missing even their rebooked connections in Boston. It was the kind of situation that required clear communication and solidarity among the crew. But as Marcus watched Veronica organizing the boarding papers with barely concealed contempt, each time she glanced toward the cockpit, he sensed that crew unity would be the least of his concerns on this flight. Boarding finally commenced nearly 2 hours behind schedule. Marcus stood at the cockpit door, greeting passengers with a reassuring smile as they entered the aircraft. Most returned his greeting, appreciative of seeing their captain taking a personal interest in their comfort, despite the delay. Veronica, stationed at the front galley, repeatedly undermined him in subtle ways. When an elderly couple expressed concern about the turbulence forecast, Veronica turned toward Ryan, who was checking an instrument panel just inside the cockpit. Don't worry, our First Officer Miller is excellent in rough weather, she said, deliberately ignoring Marcus standing barely 3 feet away. He'll make sure we avoid the worst of it. The implication was clear. The co-pilot, not the captain, would be the one ensuring their safety. Ryan looked uncomfortable, but said nothing to correct her mischaracterization. Another passenger, a businesswoman with platinum frequent flyer status, approached Marcus directly. Captain, do you think we'll make up any time in the air? I have an important meeting in Boston. Before Marcus could answer, Veronica interjected. Captain Washington's route today actually adds 20 minutes to our flight time, but perhaps that's more cautious given the conditions. Her tone suggested the decision was overly cautious rather than necessary, planting seeds of doubt about Marcus's judgment. The businesswoman glanced between them, picking up on the tension. I'm sure the captain knows what he's doing, she said, though her confidence had visibly diminished. Marcus maintained his professional demeanor. We'll do everything possible to make up time once we're at cruising altitude, ma'am. Safety remains our top priority, but I understand the importance of your schedule. As boarding continued, an older white man in first class did a double take upon seeing Marcus's captain insignia. You're the captain? He asked with unmistakable surprise. Yes, sir, for 20 years now, Marcus replied evenly. The man seemed about to say something else when Veronica appeared. Mr. Donaldson, can I get you settled with a pre-departure beverage? Captain Miller will have us on our way shortly. Marcus corrected her immediately. I'm Captain Washington. Mr. Miller is our first officer today. Oh, of course, Veronica said with a theatrical display of embarrassment. I misspoke. How careless of me. But the damage was done. Mr. Donaldson was now openly staring at Marcus with suspicion, and nearby passengers had overheard the exchange. Who's really flying this plane? Marcus overheard the man mutter to his seatmate as he moved back toward the cockpit. During final preparations, Marcus discovered a discrepancy in the flight plan loaded into the aircraft's computer. Someone had altered his carefully calculated route, changing both altitude assignments and waypoints. These modifications would have taken them directly through the weather system he had specifically planned to avoid. Marcus immediately checked the system logs. The changes had been made using Veronica's crew tablet login credentials just 20 minutes earlier, while he had been greeting passengers. When the last passenger was seated, Marcus pulled Veronica aside in the galley. "Ms. Harding, would you explain why you accessed and modified our flight plan without authorization?" Veronica's expression remained neutral. "I simply reviewed it, Captain. If changes were made, it must have been a system error. I was just looking out for passenger safety, making sure we weren't taking an unnecessarily long route. Modifying a captain's flight plan without discussion isn't looking out for safety. It's a serious breach of protocol and potentially dangerous." Ryan had stepped into the galley during this exchange and looked shocked. "The flight plan was altered? I didn't catch that during my system check." "It's been corrected now," Marcus said. "But I need everyone on this crew to follow proper procedures and respect the chain of command." Veronica's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Of course, Captain. We all want the same thing, a safe flight for our passengers." As they prepared for pushback, Marcus stepped away briefly to call Cameron Jackson, the director of operations and a trusted friend from his Air Force days. "Cam, something strange is happening on this flight. A flight attendant named Veronica Harding seems to be actively undermining my authority, even modifying my flight plan." "Veronica Harding?" Cameron's voice registered immediate concern. "Marcus, tread carefully there. Her uncle is Walter Preston on the board of directors. She's got connections you don't want to mess with." "So I'm supposed to ignore safety violations because of her family connections?" "No, but document everything. Don't give her any ammunition to use against you. There have been rumors about her having issues with certain captains in the past." "Certain captains?" Marcus immediately understood the euphemism. "Just watch yourself. Follow every procedure to the letter." Cameron paused. "And maybe review your personal records tonight, make sure everything's in order." The warning only increased Marcus's unease. Why would he need to review his records? What exactly was happening here? As they finally pushed back from the gate, Marcus could feel the tension in the aircraft. The passengers were frustrated from the long delay. And now there was an invisible current of distrust flowing through the cabin, carefully cultivated by a flight attendant who seemed determined to undermine him at every turn. Have you ever experienced someone deliberately undermining your authority at work? Comment number 1 if you've been in a situation where a colleague tried to make you look incompetent because of your race or gender. Hit that like button if you believe workplace discrimination should be taken seriously, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about overcoming injustice. But what could possibly happen next at 30,000 feet that would escalate this situation from uncomfortable to dangerous? What was Veronica really planning, and why had she targeted Captain Washington so deliberately? The stakes were about to get much higher once this aircraft left the ground. 2 hours into the flight, Captain Marcus Washington monitored the weather radar with growing concern. Despite his revised routing, they were approaching a storm system that had intensified beyond forecasts. Dark red clusters bloomed across his screen, indicating severe turbulence and potential lightning activity. "We need to make another course adjustment," Marcus told Ryan, who nodded in agreement. "Air traffic control. This is Sky Nation 657 requesting deviation 20 degrees south for weather avoidance." After receiving clearance, Marcus made a cabin announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Washington. We're adjusting our course to avoid an area of turbulence ahead. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we've cleared this weather system." He switched off the PA system and began the turn when Veronica burst into the cockpit without the customary knock. "Why are we changing course again?" she demanded. "We're already running late and now you're adding more delay?" "Ms. Harding, we're deviating around a significant weather system," Marcus explained calmly. "It's standard procedure." Without permission, Veronica leaned over to look at the radar screen. "That doesn't look so bad. I've flown through worse than that with Captain Henderson last month." Every weather system is different, Marcus stated firmly. And I'd appreciate it if you'd follow proper cockpit entry procedures in the future. Veronica ignored his reprimand and left without closing the door completely. Marcus could hear her voice carrying into the first-class cabin. Another unnecessary delay, folks. Apparently, we're taking the scenic route to Boston today. Several passengers looked up with concern, including the influential travel blogger Marcus had recognized during boarding. The man was now typing rapidly on his phone, no doubt sharing Veronica's commentary with his thousands of followers in real time. "Should I say something to her?" Ryan asked quietly. "Let's focus on flying the aircraft," Marcus replied, his jaw tight. "That's our primary responsibility." As they navigated around the weather system, the aircraft encountered moderate turbulence despite their cautious routing. The seatbelt sign had remained on, but several chimes from the cabin indicated passenger call buttons being pressed. Suddenly, a priority call came from the rear of the aircraft. "Captain, we have a medical situation in row 26, came the voice of Zoe, another flight attendant. Elderly male passenger experiencing chest pains and difficulty breathing. "Any medical professionals on board?" Marcus asked while already beginning to calculate their nearest diversion airport. "A nurse is assisting now," Zoe reported. "She's asking if we have additional medical equipment beyond the standard kit." "Tell her we can patch through to MedLink for physician consultation," Marcus replied, referring to the airline's emergency medical service. "Ryan, let's identify our closest suitable airport while we assess the passenger's condition." Marcus maintained perfect control of the aircraft through the turbulence while simultaneously coordinating the medical response. He patched the nurse through to a ground-based physician and prepared for a potential emergency landing at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. After tense minutes, the nurse reported improvement in the passenger's condition following administration of oxygen and aspirin from the medical kit. The ground physician advised continuing to Boston with monitoring, as diversion might actually delay advanced medical care given their current position. Throughout this dual crisis of weather and medical emergency, Marcus demonstrated exceptional command presence, never raising his voice yet ensuring every necessary action was taken promptly. The passengers in the know about the medical situation had witnessed true professional excellence. But as the situation stabilized, Veronica was already reshaping the narrative. Marcus overheard her speaking to passengers in the first-class cabin as she served them drinks. "Such a shame the poor man had his episode right when we hit that rough air. If we'd stayed on our original routing instead of adding all these detours, we might have missed that turbulence entirely." The implication was clear. Marcus's decision to deviate had somehow caused or worsened the medical emergency. It was a preposterous connection, but Marcus could see it landing with several passengers who nodded in apparent agreement. The travel blogger, whose name badge identified him as Scott Winters, Adventure Travel Summit Keynote, was capturing everything, occasionally shooting video of the cockpit door and the ongoing service. Ryan finally spoke up when Veronica entered the cockpit with their mid-flight meal trays. "That was inappropriate, what you said to the passengers. The captain's routing decision had nothing to do with that gentleman's condition. And you know." Veronica's smile remained pleasant, but her eyes flashed warning. "I'm just making conversation, First Officer Miller. Passengers appreciate transparency about what's happening on their flight." She leaned closer to Ryan. "Besides, between us, wouldn't you have taken the northern route today? The one that wouldn't have put us through that rough patch?" Before Ryan could answer, Veronica continued softly. "Your performance review is coming up next month, isn't it? Captain Rodriguez speaks very highly of your potential. Would be a shame if anything derailed your track to the left seat." The veiled threat hung in the air. Ryan's face flushed, but he stayed silent as Veronica left the cockpit. He looked at Marcus with a mixture of shame and apology. "She's been doing this the entire flight," Marcus said. "Don't let her drag you into it." "I should have said something sooner," Ryan admitted. "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded in acknowledgement but felt increasingly isolated. The flight had become a battleground where each decision he made was being weaponized against him. Even when he had potentially saved a man's life while skillfully navigating dangerous weather, The narrative was being twisted to paint him as incompetent or even dangerous. As they finally cleared the weather system and the flight smoothed out, Marcus checked his phone during a brief authorized break and found another cryptic text message. "Watch your back. Evidence being manufactured." The warning sent a chill down his spine. What evidence could possibly be manufactured against him? His flying had been textbook perfect despite the challenges. His credentials and qualifications were impeccable. Yet something told him this flight was merely the opening move in a game someone intended for him to lose. As Sky Nation Flight 657 began its descent into Boston Logan International Airport, Captain Marcus Washington completed his pre-landing checks with meticulous precision. Despite the turbulent flight both literally and figuratively, the approach was textbook perfect, with clear skies and minimal crosswind. "Boston approach, Sky Nation 657 descending through 10,000 feet for runway 22L, Marcus radioed, his voice calm and professional. In the cabin, passengers had largely settled after the earlier excitement. The elderly passenger who had experienced chest pains was now stable, thanks to Marcus's swift coordination of medical resources. Most travelers were simply relieved to be arriving after the weather delays. While Ryan configured the aircraft for landing, Veronica Harding made her move. She slipped into the front galley and removed something from her personal bag, a flight manual page with calculations that appeared to have been hastily and incorrectly completed. The handwriting was a reasonable facsimile of Marcus's, but just different enough to suggest carelessness or incompetence. She had prepared this forgery carefully over several weeks, using samples of Marcus's writing from crew logbooks. With practiced theatricality, Veronica gasped loudly enough for the first-class passengers to hear. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, staring at the paper with exaggerated shock. "Is everything all right?" asked the businesswoman from earlier, now concerned by the flight attendant's apparent distress. Veronica lowered her voice to a dramatic stage whisper. "I've just discovered something concerning, very concerning. I shouldn't say more right now, but..." She glanced meaningfully toward the cockpit. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several passengers exchanged worried glances as Veronica hurried to the rear galley, ostensibly to make a phone call. In reality, she was contacting her uncle, board member Walter Preston, as well as ground operations at Logan, to report a serious safety concern regarding Captain Washington. By the time Marcus executed a perfect touchdown on runway 22L, the trap was already set. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, Marcus noticed unusual activity on the ramp. 3 ground security vehicles were positioned near their arrival gate, along with what appeared to be several airline management personnel. "Sky Nation 657, proceed. To gate C-17, security personnel will meet your aircraft," came the unusual instruction from ground control. "Any reason for the security presence?" Marcus asked, immediate concern in his voice. "Not provided to us, Captain. Just follow standard taxi procedures." As they pulled into the gate, Marcus saw additional uniformed personnel waiting in the jet bridge. Something was very wrong. When the engines were shut down and passengers prepared to deplane, the cabin door opened to reveal 2 airport security officers and Sky Nation's Boston station manager. "Captain Washington," the station manager called out stiffly, "please step out here immediately." Marcus emerged from the cockpit maintaining his professional demeanor, despite the knot forming in his stomach. Before he could speak, Veronica stepped forward dramatically. "That's him," she declared loudly, ensuring passengers could hear. "I've discovered evidence that Captain Washington falsified his route calculations, and possibly his credentials. I believe he endangered this entire flight and everyone on it." The accusation, made publicly in front of deplaning passengers, sent a shockwave through the cabin. Phones immediately came out, recording the unfolding scene. Marcus stood stunned as security officers approached him. "Ms. Harding has provided documentation that raises serious concerns," the station manager stated. "We need you to come with us immediately for questioning." "What documentation?" Marcus demanded. "I've done nothing improper whatsoever." Veronica held up the forged flight calculation sheet. "This routing would have taken us directly through the storm center we barely avoided, and when I checked the signature against the company records, it doesn't fully match your credential verification forms." It was an absurd accusation. The route they had actually flown was entirely appropriate and executed perfectly. But Veronica had created just enough doubt, with just enough evidence, to force an investigation. "This is ridiculous," Marcus stated firmly. "I've been a captain with this airline for 15 years with an impeccable record." Passengers were now openly filming the confrontation, including Scott Winters, the travel blogger, whose livestream was already gathering thousands of viewers. Ryan stepped forward from the cockpit. "There's been a mistake. Captain Washington's performance was exemplary throughout this flight. I was right there the entire time." But his voice was drowned out by the growing commotion as more passengers crowded the aisle, alternately expressing concern or outrage based on the limited information they had. "Sir, please come with us now," one security officer insisted, moving toward Marcus with a hand near his restraints. "We can discuss this in private." "Am I being detained?" Marcus asked, acutely aware of how this scene would appear on social media within minutes. A black man in a position of authority being publicly challenged and removed. "Just come with us, sir," the officer repeated, now grasping Marcus's arm. The other officer moved to take Marcus's pilot credentials and identification. "We'll need to verify these." As Marcus was escorted through the terminal with security flanking him, passengers continued filming. Veronica followed at a distance, her face a mask of concern that barely concealed her satisfaction. Her phone buzzed with a text from her uncle. "Well done. This ends today." Marcus maintained his composure. Despite the public humiliation, 20 years of navigating systemic racism had taught him that displaying any emotion, especially justified anger, would only be used against him. So he walked tall and straight, even as whispers of fake pilot and security threat rippled through the terminal. Behind him, Ryan was attempting to explain to the station manager that something was very wrong with the accusation, but he was being systematically ignored. The decision had already been made. Captain Marcus Washington was guilty, until proven innocent, and perhaps not even then. As they approached the security office, Marcus caught a glimpse of a television in an airport bar. Breaking news ticker. Airline captain removed from flight after safety concerns. His face was already on the screen, his reputation being destroyed, in real time, based on nothing but a flight attendant's fabricated claim. How could one phone call possibly fix this now? And who could have enough power to counter the systematic dismantling of a distinguished career built over decades of excellence? The answers would soon shock everyone involved in this rapidly escalating situation. Marcus Washington sat alone in a small, windowless room within the airport security complex. The stark fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across the metal table where his captain's credentials and phone had been placed just out of reach. For a man who had commanded aircraft worth hundreds of millions of dollars just an hour earlier, being treated like a common criminal was both shocking and infuriatingly familiar. "Wait here," the security officer named Dennison had instructed, before locking the door from the outside. That had been 45 minutes ago, a deliberate tactic Marcus recognized from his military training on interrogation techniques. Make them wait, let anxiety build, break down their composure before questioning begins. But Marcus wouldn't break easily. Too much was at stake. Finally, the door opened to reveal Officer Dennison, accompanied by a Sky Nation representative Marcus didn't recognize, and another security official who positioned himself silently in the corner. "Captain Washington," the Sky Nation representative began, emphasizing his title with barely disguised skepticism. "I'm Thomas Barrett, Legal Compliance, Manager for the Northeast region. We need to discuss the serious allegations made by Senior Flight Attendant Harding." Marcus sat up straighter. "I'd like to contact Sky Nation's Operations Center first. This entire situation is based on fabricated evidence." Barrett exchanged glances with Officer Dennison. "That won't be possible right now. Ms. Harding has provided documentation suggesting irregularities with your flight calculations and possibly your credentials." "May I see this so-called evidence?" Marcus asked. Barrett placed a document on the table, the flight planning sheet Veronica had produced. "Ms. Harding discovered this in the cockpit. The routing calculations would have taken Flight 657 directly, through severe weather, potentially endangering everyone aboard. And the signature." He paused dramatically. doesn't fully match your credential verification forms. Marcus examined the paper without touching it. This isn't my handwriting, and it certainly isn't the flight plan we filed or flew today. This is a forgery. Officer Dennison scoffed audibly. Everyone says that when confronted with evidence. Marcus looked more carefully at Dennison, a sense of recognition forming. Have we met before, officer? A flicker of something crossed Dennison's face. I process hundreds of people weekly. But Marcus remembered now. 3 years earlier, he had filed a complaint against a security officer who had pulled him out of the crew line for additional screening, despite his clearly visible captain's uniform and credentials. That officer had been Dennison, who had made Marcus miss his departure slot while subjecting him to questions no white captain had ever been asked. Ms. Harding has given an extensive statement, Barrett continued. She describes multiple instances during today's flight where your decisions raised safety concerns. She also noted discrepancies in how you identified yourself to passengers versus your documentation. That's patently false, Marcus stated firmly. First Officer Miller was in the cockpit with me throughout the flight. He can confirm that every decision I made was correct and appropriate, including our weather deviation that likely prevented injuries. We'll speak with First Officer Miller separately, Barrett replied dismissively. Ms. Harding is a highly respected senior crew member with an unblemished record. And I'm a captain with 20 years of exemplary service, Marcus countered. Why would her word automatically outweigh mine? The question hung in the air, its implicit accusation of bias making Barrett shift uncomfortably. Officer Dennison, however, seemed unfazed. Let's discuss your credentials, Dennison interjected, picking up Marcus's pilot license and FAA medical certificate. Ms. Harding suggests there may be irregularities. My credentials are completely in order, Marcus stated, as they have been for my entire career. We'll need to verify that, Barrett said. In the meantime, you'll remain here while we conduct our investigation. Sky Nation takes safety allegations extremely seriously. I want to contact a lawyer, Marcus stated firmly. Dennison's eyebrows raised. A lawyer? If there's nothing to hide, why would you need an attorney? Because my rights are being violated based on false accusations, Marcus replied evenly. And I know exactly how situations like this can be manipulated. Requesting legal representation. Doesn't look good, Captain, Barrett said, his tone suggesting Marcus had just confirmed his guilt. It suggests consciousness of wrongdoing. It suggests I understand my rights, Marcus corrected. And I'm exercising them. Barrett exchanged another look with Dennison. Very well. But know that Sky Nation is already initiating preliminary suspension procedures pending investigation. Your decision to lawyer up will be noted in the report. As if on cue, the door opened again, and a harried-looking man in a Sky Nation management uniform entered. I'm Daniel Whitaker, Boston Station Manager. Is everything under control here? The subtext was clear. Was the black pilot causing problems? Mr. Washington is being cooperative, Barrett answered, deliberately dropping Marcus's title. But he's requesting an attorney before answering further questions. Whitaker frowned. That complicates things. Our PR team is already fielding calls. The incident is trending on social media. Incident? Marcus asked. You mean the false accusation and public humiliation of a senior captain based on fabricated evidence? Whitaker barely glanced at Marcus. We need to issue a statement immediately. The safety of our passengers is our top priority, and we take all security concerns seriously, etc. The discussion continued as if Marcus weren't present, with Whitaker clearly more concerned about the airline's public image than the destruction of a captain's reputation and career. What about First Officer Miller? Marcus asked, interrupting. Their PR planning. He witnessed everything on that flight. He's being debriefed separately, Whitaker replied vaguely. What he didn't say was that Ryan Miller was being subjected to intense pressure in another room, with veiled threats about his career trajectory if he didn't corroborate at least some aspects of Veronica's story. Young pilots with families and mortgages were particularly vulnerable to such tactics. Captain Washington, Whitaker finally addressed him directly. Given the serious nature of these allegations, You're being placed on immediate administrative suspension pending full investigation. You'll need to surrender your company ID and secure credentials now." "On what grounds?" Marcus demanded. "You haven't even completed a basic investigation." "It's standard procedure when safety allegations are made," Barrett interjected smoothly. "Nothing personal, but it was personal. Deeply, intentionally personal." Marcus recognized the pattern that had played out countless times throughout his career, and the careers of other black professionals who dared to succeed in spaces traditionally reserved for white men. As the suspension paperwork was placed before him, Marcus made a critical decision. He would sign nothing and say nothing further without representation, but he would request one phone call not to family or even to a lawyer, but to someone whose voice could cut through this entire charade. "Before I consider signing anything, I'm entitled to a phone call," Marcus stated firmly. Officer Dennison looked to Barrett, who nodded reluctantly. "One call, supervised." "I'll need privacy for this call," Marcus insisted. "It's to my attorney." A half-truth that served his purpose. 5 minutes, Dennison conceded, clearly unhappy with the request. "And we'll be right outside." When they finally left him alone with his phone, Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't call the airline's operations center or the pilots' union or even his family. Instead, he dialed a number few would recognize, one he hadn't used in nearly 5 years, but had memorized for situations where all other options had failed. Have you ever been in a situation where you were misjudged based solely on your appearance or background? Comment number 1. If you've ever been unfairly accused of something you didn't do because of prejudice. Hit that like button if you believe in standing up for yourself, even when the system is stacked against you. And subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage in the face of injustice. But who could Marcus possibly call that would have the power to overcome such a coordinated attack on his career and reputation? What connection from his past could possibly save him now? And how far would Veronica and her allies go to destroy him once they realized he wasn't surrendering quietly? The phone rang 3 times as Marcus Washington waited, acutely aware that his entire career and reputation hung in the balance. A lifetime of excellence, reduced to this moment. "Richardson," answered a commanding voice. "General, this is Captain Marcus Washington, sir. I apologize for the unexpected call, but I'm invoking Cobalt Protocol." There was a brief pause. "Location and situation, son?" "Boston Logan Airport Security Office. Being detained under false accusations regarding my pilot credentials and performance. Orchestrated attempt to end my career, sir." "Understood. Stand fast, Captain. 15 minutes. The call ended abruptly. Marcus set down the phone just as Officer Dennison opened the door. "Time's up," he announced with satisfaction. "Your lawyer coming to save you?" "Something like that," Marcus replied calmly. What Officer Dennison couldn't know was that the man Marcus had just called wasn't an attorney. General James Richardson was the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking and most senior military officer in the United States Armed Forces, and the principal military advisor to the president. Few people knew that. 12 years earlier, then Major Marcus Washington had been temporarily assigned to fly a classified mission over Afghanistan when their aircraft was hit by enemy fire. With exceptional skill, Marcus had managed a perilous landing in hostile territory. Then, with their extraction delayed by weather, he had led a defensive operation that saved the lives of everyone aboard, including then Colonel Richardson. The said mission remained classified, but the bond forged between the two men was unbreakable. The Cobalt Protocol was their private arrangement for an emergency where one needed the other's help without bureaucratic delays. In all these years, Marcus had never invoked it until today. Exactly 14 minutes after the call, Barrett's phone rang. The change in his expression as he listened to the caller told Marcus everything he needed to know. "Yes, sir." "Yes." "He's here." "No, sir, I wasn't aware of his background." "Yes, sir, immediately." Barrett ended the call looking pale. "That was the FAA regional administrator. They're sending representatives immediately and—" He swallowed hard. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's office also called them directly about this matter. Dennison looked stunned. "The Joint Chiefs? What the hell is going on?" I have no idea, Barrett admitted, his earlier confidence evaporating. But we've been instructed to return Captain Washington's credentials immediately and treat this as a top priority national security matter. Within minutes, the atmosphere in the detention room transformed completely. Marcus's belongings were returned with awkward apologies. Whitaker, the station manager, reappeared with a completely different demeanor. Captain Washington, there appears to have been a serious misunderstanding. We deeply regret any inconvenience. Inconvenience? Marcus repeated coldly. You publicly removed me from my aircraft based on fabricated evidence, detained me without cause, threatened my career, and damaged my reputation. That's considerably more than an inconvenience, Mr. Whitaker. Before Whitaker could respond, the door opened to admit two stern-faced FAA officials and a military aide in full-dress uniform. Captain Washington? The aide addressed him directly. General Richardson sends his regards. These FAA officials will be conducting an immediate investigation into today's events. The general has requested you remain in Boston until this matter is resolved. A hotel suite has been arranged for you. The military aide handed Marcus a card with a direct line to the general's office. For any further issues, sir. The security, officers and airline representatives who had been so dismissive of Marcus minutes earlier now stood awkwardly silent, aware that they had severely misjudged the man they'd been mistreating. Ms. Veronica Harding needs to be interviewed as part of this investigation, Marcus stated firmly. She deliberately fabricated evidence and made false accusations. Ms. Harding will be located and interviewed immediately, one FAA official confirmed, along with all crew members from your flight. Word of Marcus's sudden reversal of fortune spread quickly. Veronica was enjoying a celebratory drink with several sympathetic crew members when she received an urgent call from her uncle. What the hell did you do? Preston demanded without preamble. Do you have any idea who Washington is connected to? What are you talking about? Veronica asked, her triumph fading. Everything went according to plan. Until he made one phone call to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Preston hissed. The FAA is crawling all over this now, and they're looking for you specifically. Veronica felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. He's just a diversity hire. There's no way he has those kinds of connections. Well, he does. Get back to the airport immediately and stick to the story that you genuinely believed there were irregularities. Claim it was a good faith report, not a deliberate fabrication. I'll see what I can do from my end. As Veronica rushed back to the airport, Marcus was being escorted to a luxury hotel suite in downtown Boston. The military aide remained respectfully at his side. The general wishes to express his personal regret that you experienced this situation, sir. He's initiated inquiries at several levels. Please thank the general for his quick response, Marcus replied. His intervention was perfectly timed. Once alone in his suite, Marcus finally allowed himself a moment to process the day's events. The relief of his immediate vindication was tempered by the knowledge that someone had orchestrated a sophisticated attempt to destroy his career. This wasn't just Veronica acting alone. The coordination suggested a deeper conspiracy. He tried, calling Ryan Miller but received no answer. Was the young first officer still being pressured by Sky Nation management? Or had he already sided with the stronger political forces within the airline? Marcus began methodically documenting everything that had happened during the flight, creating a detailed timeline with specific instances of Veronica's behavior. As he worked, he realized he needed his backup documentation, his personnel file, credentials history, and flight records that he kept securely at home for exactly this type of situation. He called his neighbor in Denver to check on his house and was disturbed to learn troubling news. Marcus, someone broke into your place today, his neighbor reported. I called the police when I saw the door ajar, but whoever did it was already gone. They tossed your home office pretty thoroughly. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Whoever was behind this attack on his career had anticipated he might have evidence to defend himself and had moved to eliminate it. Did the police take a report? Marcus asked. They did, but honestly they didn't seem too concerned. Called it routine burglary. Marcus thanked his neighbor and immediately called hotel security to request additional measures for his suite. Then he contacted the Boston FBI field office to report the suspicious timing of the break-in, coinciding with the false accusations. A quick check of the hotel's security cameras revealed that the hall monitoring system outside his room had mysteriously malfunctioned for a 20-minute period shortly after his arrival, a clear indication that whoever was targeting him had extensive resources and connections. As night fell over Boston, Marcus realized this was far from over. He had survived the initial ambush thanks to his connection to General Richardson, but his opponents were already regrouping. They had underestimated him once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Sky Nation HQ tomorrow, 9 a.m. Board representatives will be present. Come alone. Marcus stared at the message, understanding its implications. This had just escalated from a flight attendant's false accusation to a corporate-level confrontation. Tomorrow, he would face the real power behind Veronica Harding's attack, and they would be fully prepared. He would need to be ready too. The Sky Nation corporate headquarters in Boston occupied the top 5 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Marcus Washington arrived precisely at 8:45 a.m., dressed in his full captain's uniform despite being technically on administrative leave. He understood the psychological importance of presenting himself as the senior professional he was, not as someone defending against accusations. The reception area on the 38th floor featured massive photographs of Sky Nation aircraft soaring through azure skies. Marcus couldn't help but notice that every pilot visible in these promotional images was white. "Captain Washington," the receptionist greeted him with practiced neutrality. "They're expecting you in the Horizon conference room, 15th door on your left." As Marcus walked the long corridor, he mentally prepared for what awaited him. General Richardson had called earlier that morning. "They'll try to intimidate you with numbers and corporate speak," the general had advised. "Stay focused on the facts. We've got people looking into both Harding and her uncle. There's definitely something there." The Horizon conference room turned out to be an impressive space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Boston Harbor. More telling than the view, however, was the composition of people waiting inside. 8 executives, all white, all male, all wearing nearly identical dark suits, sat along one side of a massive mahogany table. Their physical arrangement made clear this was not a discussion among equals but something closer to a tribunal. "Captain Washington, thank you for joining us," began the man at the center, whom Marcus recognized as Calvin Foster, Sky Nation's chief operating officer. "Please have a seat." Marcus took the single chair positioned opposite the row of executives, noting the deliberate power dynamic this created. "I understand there was some confusion yesterday regarding Flight 657, Foster continued with corporate understatement. "We're here to clarify the situation." "Is confusion how you characterize the fabrication of evidence against a senior captain and his public removal from an aircraft based on false accusations?" Marcus asked calmly. Foster's smile tightened. "We're still gathering facts, Captain. Ms. Harding has provided her perspective on the events, which raised legitimate safety concerns that required immediate action. And has First Officer Miller provided his perspective?" Marcus inquired. He was in the cockpit throughout the flight and witnessed Ms. Harding's behavior firsthand. A brief exchange of glances among the executives told Marcus that Ryan had, indeed, given testimony, and it likely hadn't aligned with Veronica's version. "We've spoken with First Officer Miller," another executive confirmed without elaborating. "We're considering all available information, including the fact that Ms. Harding deliberately forged flight documentation to support her false claims," Marcus pressed. "That's a serious accusation, Captain," Foster replied. "Ms. Harding is a valued employee with 12 years of exemplary service. And I'm a captain with 20 years of exemplary service, numerous commendations, and an unblemished safety record," Marcus countered. Yet her word was immediately accepted over mine. I wonder why that might be. The unspoken question hung in the air. No one seemed eager to address the obvious racial component of the situation. A large screen at the end of the conference room flickered to life, revealing the face of Walter Preston, Sky Nation board member and Veronica Harding's uncle, joining remotely. "Gentlemen, I apologize for not being there in person," Preston began without acknowledging Marcus directly. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports regarding yesterday's incident." Preston was in his 60s, with silver hair and the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to wielding power without challenge. "While I appreciate Captain Washington's service, this situation raises concerns that cannot be ignored. Perhaps an administrative leave would be appropriate while we conduct a thorough review." "Administrative leave based on what evidence, Mr. Preston?" Marcus asked directly. "The forged document Ms. Harding produced has already been proven fraudulent by FAA investigators." Preston's expression hardened. "There are broader concerns about judgment and compatibility with Sky Nation's operational culture, Captain. This isn't solely about yesterday's flight." "Please elaborate on these broader concerns," Marcus requested, maintaining his professional tone while internally noting the coded language often used to push out minority employees. Instead of answering directly, Preston changed tactics. "Your military record is certainly impressive, Captain Washington, though one has to wonder if the same accommodations made for diversity initiatives in the armed forces might have influenced your rapid advancement there." The insult was both clear and calculated, questioning whether Marcus's achievements were merit-based or simply the result of affirmative action policies. Several executives shifted uncomfortably, but none challenged Preston's insinuation. "My record speaks for itself," Marcus replied evenly, "as does my performance over 20 years of commercial aviation. Perhaps we should review the passenger satisfaction ratings for my flights compared to company average?" "Statistics can be manipulated," Preston dismissed. "What concerns me is the pattern of incidents where you've claimed discrimination when faced with standard oversight." Now Marcus understood their strategy. They were constructing a narrative painting him as someone who played the race card to avoid legitimate scrutiny. It was a classic tactic he'd seen throughout his career, designed to place him on the defensive. "Please identify these incidents specifically," Marcus challenged. "I'd like to address each one." Foster interjected before Preston could respond. "We're getting off track. The purpose of today's meeting is to determine next steps regarding Flight 657. Our suggestion of administrative leave with pay is quite generous under the circumstances." "Generous?" Marcus repeated. "You're suggesting I accept punishment for allegations already proven false." "It's standard procedure, not punishment," another executive insisted. Marcus decided to change tactics. "I've taken the liberty of compiling some interesting statistics about Sky Nation," he said, removing a folder from his briefcase. "In the past 5 years, 7 black pilots have been pushed out of the airline following disciplinary actions or performance concerns. In each case, the initial complaints came from the same group of flight attendants, including Ms. Harding." The executives exchanged uneasy glances as Marcus continued. "Additionally, despite Sky Nation's public commitments to diversity, the percentage of black pilots has actually decreased over the past decade, while increasing industry-wide at your competitors." Preston's face had reddened on the video screen. "Where did you obtain this information? These are internal personnel matters." "I've been building these statistics for years, Mr. Preston. Black aviation professionals tend to share information about which airlines genuinely support diversity and which merely pay lip service to it." Before Preston could respond, the conference room door opened, and a young black woman in a Sky Nation flight attendant uniform entered tentatively. "I apologize for interrupting," she said. "I was told to deliver these documents to Captain Washington immediately." All eyes turned to the newcomer as she handed Marcus a sealed envelope. No one had authorized this interruption, and the confusion among the executives was evident. "Thank you, Ms." Marcus read her name tag. "Ms. Williams." "Zoe Williams, sir," she confirmed with a subtle nod that conveyed much more than mere courtesy. As she turned to leave, she whispered, "Check your email right away." The interruption had broken the momentum of Preston's attack. Marcus seized the opportunity to reset the conversation. "Gentlemen, let me be clear. I will not accept administrative leave or any other punitive measure based on false accusations. The FAA is already investigating Ms. Harding's actions, and I've filed formal complaints regarding yesterday's events." "Are you threatening this airline, Captain?" Preston demanded. "I'm stating facts, Mr. Preston. Facts supported by evidence, unlike the accusations against me." The meeting continued for another hour, becoming increasingly tense as Marcus refused to accept any arrangement that implied wrongdoing on his part. Throughout, he maintained perfect professionalism, never raising his voice or showing anger despite the increasingly transparent attempts to force him out. When the executives finally called for a break, Marcus checked his email as Zoe had suggested. There, he found a message from an anonymous address containing a trove of internal Sky Nation documents, including a list titled Pilot Retention Priority that clearly categorized aviators by race, with troubling notations next to the names of minority pilots. More damning still were email exchanges between Veronica Harding and other flight attendants discussing strategies for documenting concerns about specific black pilots to create paper trails for eventual termination. Zoe had apparently been secretly collecting evidence of systemic discrimination for months. As Marcus reviewed these documents, his phone buzzed with a text from General Richardson. Preston's financials show interesting connections to pilot training schools that have been sued for discrimination. Keep pressing. Reinforcements coming. When the executives reconvened, expecting to continue wearing down Marcus's resistance, they found him transformed. No longer just defending himself, he was now armed with evidence of a systemic problem that extended far beyond his individual case. The power dynamic in the room had shifted, though none of the executives yet realized just how dramatically the tables had turned. The luxury hotel suite that served as Marcus Washington's temporary command center was becoming crowded. What had begun as a simple meeting with Zoe Williams to discuss her evidence had evolved into something far more significant, an informal coalition of minority Sky Nation employees who had individually been suffering in silence, now united by Marcus's stand against the system. "I never thought I'd actually meet you in person," admitted Jamal Turner, a maintenance supervisor who had been repeatedly passed over for promotion despite perfect evaluations. "You're kind of a legend among black aviation professionals." "I'm just a pilot trying to do my job," Marcus replied modestly, though he recognized the responsibility that came with his visibility. Zoe Williams, the young flight attendant who had risked her career to help him, was methodically organizing digital evidence on her laptop. At 28, she radiated a quiet determination that reminded Marcus of himself 20 years earlier. "Veronica didn't just target you, Captain," Zoe explained. "I've documented 6 other black pilots who were forced out after she filed complaints against them. It's always the same pattern. She claims safety concerns or unprofessional behavior, creates just enough documentation to trigger an investigation, and then the airline's review process does the rest. And her uncle makes sure the outcome is what she wants," added Carlos Rodriguez, a dispatcher who had witnessed the aftermath of several such campaigns. "What made you start collecting this evidence?" Marcus asked Zoe. She paused, her expression darkening. "My father was a pilot for Continental in the 90s. He faced the same kind of systematic push-out that's happening here. He fought it alone, and lost everything: job, reputation, eventually even his health. I promised myself I'd never stand by and watch it happen to someone else." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus checked the security peephole, surprised to see Ryan Miller, his first officer from Flight 657, standing nervously in the hallway. When Marcus admitted him, Ryan looked relieved but anxious. "I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner," he began. "Immediately. They kept me in debriefings for hours trying to get me to corroborate Veronica's story." "Did you?" Marcus asked directly. Ryan shook his head emphatically. "No, sir. I told them exactly what happened. Your flying was exemplary, your decisions were correct, and Veronica was actively undermining you throughout the flight. But," he hesitated, "I don't think they were writing down everything I said." "They weren't," Zoe confirmed. "I have access to the interview transcripts. Your statements were heavily edited before being added to the official record." Ryan looked shocked, then angry. "They can't do that." "They've been doing it for years," Carlos responded. "This isn't new, it's just never been documented before." Marcus studied Ryan thoughtfully. "You're taking a risk by being here." "Why?" Ryan straightened his posture. "Because what happened was wrong, sir. I was raised to stand up for what's right, but on that flight I froze. I let Veronica bulldoze you because I was afraid for my own career. I won't make that mistake again." Marcus nodded appreciatively. Allyship from white colleagues was rare and valuable in these situations. Thank you, Ryan. Your testimony could be crucial. As the evening progressed, more Sky Nation employees arrived, some in person, others joining virtually. They shared stories, compared notes, and began building a comprehensive picture of a troubling pattern throughout the airline. It's not just Veronica, explained Layla Patel, a veteran gate agent. She's part of an informal group that calls themselves Traditional Aviation Values. They don't advertise their existence, but they're dedicated to keeping aviation the way it's always been. Which means white and male, Jamal added bluntly. Marcus's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from one of General Richardson's aides. Multiple victims identified across 3 airlines, same MO, Preston connection confirmed to all cases. The pattern was becoming clearer. This was larger than one flight attendant's prejudice, or even one airline's culture. Walter Preston appeared to be at the center of a coordinated effort spanning multiple carriers. As they continued mapping connections, Carlos received an alert on his phone. "Captain, you need to see this," he said urgently, pulling up a tabloid website. The headline made Marcus's stomach tighten. Disgraced pilot's military record questioned. Sources reveal incidents omitted from official files. The article contained fabricated stories about Marcus's military service, including allegations of reprimands that had never occurred. Most disturbing was the inclusion of details that could only have come from someone with access to military personnel systems. "They're escalating," Marcus observed grimly. "This isn't just about pushing me out of Sky Nation anymore. They're trying to destroy my entire reputation." Even as they processed this development, Zoe received a text from a neighbor. "Captain, they've vandalized your home in Denver. Racial slurs spray-painted on your garage door." The room fell silent. The attack had moved beyond professional to deeply personal. Ryan broke the silence. "You need protection, sir. This isn't just corporate politics anymore." Marcus nodded, already texting General Richardson about the escalation. Within minutes, his phone rang with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Captain Washington, this is Andrew Phillips, Sky Nation CEO. I understand you've had a rather difficult 48 hours. Marcus put the call on speaker. "That's one way to describe it, Mr. Phillips. I want to personally assure you that I'm looking into this situation," Phillips continued smoothly. "Discrimination has no place at Sky Nation, and we take these allegations very seriously." The practiced corporate response rang hollow, given the evidence they'd assembled. Marcus noted how Phillips referred to allegations of discrimination, subtly framing the situation as unproven. "I appreciate your concern," Marcus replied carefully. "Will your investigation include Walter Preston's role in targeting minority pilots across multiple airlines?" A telling pause. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Captain. Mr. Preston is a respected board member with decades of aviation experience. Indeed, including his financial interests in pilot training schools that have systematically excluded minority candidates." Another pause, longer this time. "I think we should continue this conversation privately, Captain. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow?" "I'll have my attorney contact your office to arrange it," Marcus responded, ending the call before Phillips could continue fishing for information about what he knew. "He's feeling you out," Zoe observed, "trying to determine how much evidence you have." "And who else knows about it?" Carlos added. By midnight, their coalition had grown to 15 current and former Sky Nation employees, each contributing pieces to the puzzle. They identified other victims of Veronica's schemes across multiple airlines, all following the same pattern, all connecting eventually to Walter Preston's sphere of influence. As the others finally departed, promising to continue their work remotely, Marcus received a concerning text from Ryan, who had left earlier. "Being followed after leaving your hotel. Black SUV, tinted windows, taking evasive action." Minutes later, Zoe discovered her Sky Nation email access had been revoked. Carlos found his scheduling system login similarly disabled. "They know we're organizing," Marcus concluded. "They're moving to isolate us and cut off our information sources." He didn't share his more troubling thought: if they were willing to vandalize his home and follow his allies, What other lines were they prepared to cross? Have you ever been part of forming an alliance against injustice? Comment number 1. If you've ever joined forces with others to stand up against discrimination in your workplace or community. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of unity against systemic racism. And subscribe to our channel for more stories about brave people fighting back against powerful systems. But as Marcus and his allies gathered evidence, the forces against them were mobilizing too. How far would Preston and his network go to protect their power? What would happen when Zoe returned to work, now identified as a whistleblower, and could their hastily formed alliance withstand the full pressure of corporate power determined to silence them? Marcus Washington had spent his entire career navigating the subtle and not-so-subtle barriers facing black professionals in aviation. He had always chosen his battles carefully, often accepting minor indignities to preserve the larger goal of advancing in an industry that remained stubbornly resistant to change. But as he sat across from Andrea Chen, a respected aviation journalist who had flown in specifically to meet him, Marcus knew he was abandoning a lifetime of cautious navigation for a far riskier strategy. Captain Washington, what you're describing is explosive, Andrea said, reviewing the notes from their 2-hour interview. Systematic discrimination, coordinated efforts to push out minority pilots, falsification of records. Are you absolutely certain you want to go public with this? The industry will close ranks against you. Marcus considered her warning. His attorney had advised against speaking to the media, suggesting they pursue remedies through legal channels first. But the vandalism of his home and the surveillance of his allies had convinced him they couldn't afford to wait for the slow grinding of legal processes. Ms. Chen, this isn't just about saving my career anymore. There are pilots who've already lost their livelihoods because of this system. There are qualified candidates who never got the chance to fly because Preston's flight schools rejected them based on race. This has to stop. Andrea nodded, respecting his decision. I'll need to corroborate as much as possible. Other sources, documentation. You'll have it, Marcus promised. But my allies are risking their jobs by coming forward. Their identities must be protected. Within 48 hours, Andrea's article appeared in Aviation Professional Quarterly, a respected industry journal with substantial influence among airline executives, regulators, and pilots. The piece was meticulously researched and measured in tone, but its content was devastating. Systematic discrimination alleged at major airlines. Veteran captain exposes coordinated effort to remove minority pilots. The article detailed the pattern of targeted harassment, the role of Veronica Harding and her uncle Walter Preston, and the broader implications for the industry. It included anonymized testimonies from other victims and statistics showing the declining representation of black pilots at airlines where Preston had influence. The story exploded beyond aviation circles. Major news outlets picked it up, placing a spotlight on an industry that had largely avoided scrutiny of its diversity practices. Social media amplified the conversation, with hashtags like "Flying While Black" trending nationally. Sky Nation's initial response was corporate damage control. Their PR department issued a carefully worded statement. Sky Nation Airlines takes allegations of discrimination extremely seriously. We are conducting a thorough investigation into the concerns raised by Captain Washington. Diversity and inclusion are core values at Sky Nation, and we remain committed to maintaining a workplace where all employees are treated with dignity and respect. But behind the scenes, Walter Preston was orchestrating a vicious counterattack. He had underestimated Marcus once. He wouldn't make that mistake again. The first salvo came in the form of selectively edited cockpit recordings from Marcus's previous flights. Though airline protocols strictly protected such recordings, someone with high-level access had extracted snippets of Marcus's voice from various flights and spliced them together to make him sound unprofessional and temperamental. These doctored recordings were leaked to friendly media outlets with headlines questioning Marcus's judgment and temperament. Is this the man you want flying your plane? Sky Nation released a statement that carefully distanced itself from the leak while simultaneously giving it credibility. While we cannot comment on the source of these unauthorized recordings, Sky Nation takes all questions about pilot temperament and judgment with the utmost seriousness. Our investigation into all aspects of this situation continues. Marcus recognized the strategy. They were attempting to transform a clear case of racial discrimination into a debate about his personal fitness as a pilot. It was a classic misdirection tactic, shifting focus from systemic issues to individual character. The pressure intensified. Marcus noticed vehicles following him when he left his hotel. His email was hacked, with private conversations appearing in selective leaks. Even his financial records were mysteriously accessed, with questions raised about how a pilot could afford his home and investment portfolio, a subtle implication of impropriety that ignored his military pension and 15 years of careful financial planning. Zoe Williams, the young flight attendant who had become his key ally, was suddenly fired for unrelated infractions that hadn't been issues during her 5 years of service. The message was clear. Anyone who stood with Marcus would pay a price. Ryan Miller faced intense pressure too. Sky Nation management called him in for a series of follow-up interviews, each time pushing him to sign a statement contradicting his earlier testimony about Flight 657. They reminded him of his upcoming captain evaluation, his family's medical insurance that depended on his employment, the mortgage he had recently taken on. "You've got a promising future here, Ryan," a senior vice president told him. "Don't throw it away for someone who's on his way out. Just sign the statement saying you weren't in position to observe all interactions between Captain Washington and Ms. Harding. That's all." The pressure campaign expanded to Marcus's other allies. Several found themselves reassigned to less desirable routes or schedules. Others discovered their performance reviews suddenly included negative comments that hadn't been mentioned in their actual evaluations. Public opinion, initially supportive of Marcus, began to waver as Preston's media campaign gained traction. The edited recordings, though obviously manipulated to anyone with aviation experience, created doubt among the general public. Social media debates became increasingly divided, with some questioning why Marcus hadn't raised these concerns earlier, if discrimination was so pervasive. Even some of Marcus's initial supporters began to distance themselves, concerned about becoming collateral damage in what was increasingly portrayed as one disgruntled employee's vendetta against his employer rather than a legitimate civil rights issue. General Richardson remained steadfast in his private support, but even he cautioned that his direct involvement had limits. "This is becoming a corporate and civil matter, Marcus. My military authority only extends so far. These people play by different rules." As Marcus's position appeared to weaken, Walter Preston made what he considered a generous offer, conveyed through intermediaries, a substantial financial settlement in exchange for Marcus's resignation and a non-disclosure agreement. The package would ensure Marcus would never need to work again, provided he agreed to drop all allegations and admit to misunderstandings regarding his accusations of discrimination. "Take the money and disappear," was the unspoken message. "Or we'll make sure you leave with nothing." For a moment, Marcus considered it. The toll of the fight was wearing on him physically and emotionally. The constant stress, the invasion of his privacy, the damage to relationships with colleagues he'd once considered friends, all of it made the settlement offer tempting. He could walk away financially secure, perhaps find another career outside aviation. But then he remembered Zoe's father, who had fought alone and lost everything. He thought of the pilots who had already been pushed out, their careers destroyed by the same tactics now being used against him. He recalled the racial slurs spray-painted on his garage door, a visceral reminder of what this fight was really about. The settlement offer wasn't generosity. It was an attempt to purchase his silence, to maintain a system that had been destroying careers and limiting opportunities for decades. Accepting it would mean everyone who had stood with him had risked their livelihoods for nothing. Marcus sent his response through his attorney. "Captain Washington rejects any settlement that includes a non-disclosure provision or requires him to withdraw his allegations. The truth is not negotiable." Preston's response was immediate and ruthless. The next day, Marcus received notice that his pilot's license had been temporarily suspended pending a psychological evaluation regarding his fitness to command an aircraft, a power move that required significant influence within the FAA. The message was clear. Preston would use every connection, every lever of power, every dirty trick to ensure Marcus Washington never flew commercially again. What had begun as one flight attendant's false accusation had escalated into an all-out war, with Marcus's entire career and reputation hanging in the balance. And as his allies began to distance themselves under mounting pressure, it appeared the forces aligned against him might finally achieve their goal. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They assumed Marcus was fighting merely to save his own career when in reality, he was fighting for something much larger, a reckoning that was long overdue. The suspension of his pilot's license should have been Marcus Washington's breaking point. Without it, he couldn't fly for any airline, rendering his experience and seniority effectively worthless. The psychological evaluation order was particularly insidious, a common tactic used against whistleblowers in various industries, designed to discredit them by suggesting mental instability. Yet instead of crushing his spirit, this latest attack only reinforced Marcus's determination. He had expected escalation. Now he knew exactly how far Preston and his allies would go. In his hotel suite, now serving as both sanctuary and command center, Marcus continued building his case with the allies who remained loyal. Their numbers had dwindled as pressure mounted, but those who stayed were fully committed. "Captain Washington?" The voice came from the hotel room phone rather than his cell. "This is front desk security. There's someone here insisting on speaking with you. He won't give his name but says it's regarding Sky Nation IT systems. Should I send him up?" Marcus exercised caution. "No, tell him I'll meet him in the hotel lobby." 15 minutes later, Marcus sat in a corner of the busy lobby, positioned to observe all entrances while remaining visible to hotel security. A nervous-looking young man in his early 30s approached, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "Captain Washington?" he asked quietly. "I'm Derek Simmons. I work in Sky Nation's IT security department." Marcus studied him carefully. "How can I help you, Mr. Simmons?" "It's how I can help you," Derek replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been monitoring the system access logs as part of my job. Someone's been going through your records, altering data, creating false documentation retroactively." "Veronica Harding?" Marcus asked. "Higher up. I've traced the access to terminal IDs used exclusively by executive-level management." Derek glanced around nervously. "There's more. Ms. Harding has a history of filing reports specifically targeting minority crew members. The pattern is obvious once you look for it." "Can you prove this?" Marcus asked. Derek nodded. "I've been documenting everything, but there's something else you need to see." He slid a flash drive across the table. Deleted emails between Harding and her uncle. They were removed from the server, but our backup system retained copies. They explicitly discuss efforts to maintain traditional standards in pilot hiring and promotion. Marcus stared at the flash drive. "Why are you helping?" "Me? You're risking your job." Derek's expression hardened. "My brother was a pilot for American, dark-skinned Latino. He faced the same kind of systematic push-out 5 years ago. Preston was on their board too back then. My brother never recovered professionally." He stood to leave. "Check you're secure. Email in an hour. I'll send more documentation." This unexpected alliance opened a flood of new evidence. Derek provided server access logs showing systematic review and alteration of Marcus's records dating back months before Flight 657. More importantly, he revealed a larger conspiracy spanning multiple airlines. The emails between Veronica and Preston explicitly referenced their efforts to maintain standards and preserve aviation culture across the industry, a thinly veiled reference to keeping cockpits predominantly white and male. They mentioned specific pilots targeted for removal, with Veronica serving as Preston's eyes and ears in the cabin. Most damning were documents showing Preston's financial connections to 3 major pilot training academies, all with suspiciously low admission rates for minority candidates. Preston had recently blocked a Sky Nation initiative to partner with historically black colleges to increase pilot diversity, citing maintenance of rigorous standards as his reason. With Derek's help, Marcus and his remaining allies mapped a network of influence that extended far beyond Sky Nation. Preston had systematically placed former colleagues and like-minded executives throughout the industry, creating a nearly invisible barrier to advancement for minority pilots. As they compiled this evidence, Marcus divided it into 3 secure packages, one for his attorney, one for Andrea Chen the journalist, and one for the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights. Each contained enough evidence to launch investigations but not the complete picture, ensuring the information would survive even if one package was intercepted. What Marcus didn't know was that Preston had already learned of the IT security breach. Within hours of Derek's meeting with Marcus, Preston's network had identified the source of the leak. Derek was fired immediately, escorted from Sky Nation headquarters by security while colleagues watched in stunned silence. His company devices were confiscated, and a team of lawyers presented him with threatening legal documents alleging violation of confidentiality agreements and theft of proprietary information. Preston moved quickly to contain the damage. Through his connections, he arranged for a federal judge to issue a temporary restraining order against Marcus, prohibiting him from disseminating confidential Sky Nation information. The order was delivered to Marcus's hotel, along with papers threatening prosecution under various computer fraud and corporate espionage statutes. Simultaneously, Sky Nation's legal department sent cease and desist letters to Andrea Chen and her publication, claiming her previous article contained false and defamatory information and threatening ruinous litigation if she published any follow-up pieces. The airline's HR department contacted every employee known to have communicated with Marcus, reminding them of their confidentiality obligations and the legal consequences of violating them. The message was clear. Anyone sharing information would face immediate termination and possible legal action. Most distressing to Marcus was the notification that his pilot's license suspension had been extended, with the evaluation requirements expanded to include additional psychiatric assessments. The FAA letter, clearly influenced by Preston's connections, cited concerns about judgment and decision-making capacity under pressure. That evening, as Marcus reviewed the legal threats with his attorney, he received a series of text messages from his allies. Zoe had been served with legal papers at her home. Ryan Miller had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation of documentation irregularities. Carlos from dispatch had found his access cards deactivated when he arrived for his shift. One by one, Preston was neutralizing everyone connected to Marcus's case. The evidence they had gathered, while compelling, would be useless if no one remained willing or able to testify about it. Marcus's attorney delivered the harsh reality. They're using their corporate resources to bury you in legal proceedings. Even with pro bono representation, you're facing years of litigation. Most of your witnesses are being intimidated into silence. Without them, documents alone won't be enough. For the first time since this ordeal began, Marcus felt the full weight of what he was up against. It wasn't just one airline or one executive. It was an entrenched system with decades of practice in protecting itself. Preston had the resources to drag legal proceedings out indefinitely, depleting Marcus's finances and resolve. As night fell over Boston, Marcus stood at his hotel window, looking out at the city lights. His allies were being picked off one by one. His professional credentials were under attack. Legal threats mounted daily. The system was closing ranks, demonstrating exactly why discrimination had persisted for so long in the industry. No one could withstand the combined pressure of corporate power, regulatory influence, and legal intimidation. All appeared lost, as even Marcus's most committed allies began to distance themselves, not out of disloyalty, but out of self-preservation. Families needed to be supported, mortgages paid, careers salvaged from the wreckage of Preston's retribution campaign. Marcus Washington, who had navigated hostile airspace in military combat zones, now found himself in a different kind of battle zone, one where the enemies were invisible, the rules constantly changing, and victory seemingly impossible. But as he had learned during his military career, sometimes the moment when defeat seems most certain is precisely when one must execute the most audacious strategy. And Marcus had been developing such a strategy from the moment he realized the true scope of what he was fighting against. Tomorrow would determine whether that strategy would lead to total defeat or an unprecedented victory that could transform the industry forever. The morning of the final hearing arrived with the weight of inevitability. Sky Nation had scheduled what they termed a conclusive review of Captain Marcus Washington's case, ostensibly to determine his future with the airline. In reality, everyone involved understood this was to be the formal execution of his career, the carefully orchestrated termination of a pilot who had dared to challenge the system. The corporate headquarters gleamed in the morning sun as Marcus arrived, dressed impeccably in his full captain's uniform despite his suspended status. The security guards eyed him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. As he presented his credentials, they had clearly been briefed about him. "Captain Washington," the receptionist greeted him with professional detachment. "The boardroom is prepared for your hearing. 14th floor." Marcus nodded his thanks, maintaining the calm demeanor that had sustained him through combat missions and countless flights through turbulent skies. Today would require all of his discipline and focus. The boardroom was arranged like a courtroom. On one side sat an impressive array of Sky Nation executives and legal counsel. Walter Preston occupied the central position at the table, having flown in specifically for this occasion rather than participating remotely. His presence signaled the importance he placed on personally witnessing Marcus's professional demise. "Captain Washington," Preston began with false cordiality, "we appreciate your promptness. This proceeding is being recorded for internal purposes only. Do you have legal representation today?" "I represent myself," Marcus replied evenly, taking his seat at the solitary table positioned across from the corporate phalanx. Preston raised an eyebrow but continued. "As you know, this hearing will determine your employment status with Sky Nation following numerous concerning incidents, culminating in the events of Flight 657. Marcus noted the plural incidents, a continuation of their strategy to paint him as a problematic employee, rather than addressing the specific false accusations from that flight. "For clarity," Preston continued, "we'll begin with testimony from Senior Flight Attendant Veronica Harding regarding her observations during Flight 657 and previous flights with Captain Washington." On cue, Veronica entered the room, dressed conservatively in her uniform. She carried a portfolio of documents and wore an expression of practiced professionalism tinged with what appeared to be reluctance, as if she were an unwilling participant forced by conscience to testify. "Ms. Harding, please describe the events that caused you concern during Flight 657, Preston prompted. Veronica launched into her carefully rehearsed narrative, describing Marcus as agitated, defensive, and erratic during the flight. She claimed his weather deviation decisions had been unnecessary and potentially dangerous, that he had been dismissive of crew input, and that she had discovered calculation errors that raised serious concerns about his preparation. "And this wasn't the first time you'd observed such behavior from Captain Washington?" Preston asked leadingly. "Unfortunately, no," Veronica replied with feigned regret. "I've noted similar incidents on previous flights, though never quite as concerning as on Flight 657. Marcus observed her performance with clinical detachment. The lies were expected. What interested him more was the body language of the executives. Most avoided eye contact with him, focusing instead on their notes or on Veronica. Only Preston watched him directly, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, the smile of a man who believed victory was assured. As Veronica continued her testimony, occasionally referencing documents from her portfolio, Marcus's phone vibrated silently in his pocket. A single text message from an unknown number, in position. The timing was perfect. Veronica had just claimed under oath that she had never targeted other minority pilots with similar accusations, a direct lie contradicted by the evidence Marcus had gathered. "Do you have questions for Ms. Harding, Captain Washington?" Preston finally asked, clearly expecting either an emotional outburst or futile denials. "Just one," Marcus replied calmly. "Ms. Harding, are you aware that this entire proceeding is being monitored by federal investigators from the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General as part of an active investigation into discriminatory practices at Sky Nation Airlines?" The room froze. Veronica's composure cracked visibly as her eyes darted to her uncle. "That's absurd," Preston declared, though a hint of uncertainty had entered his voice. "This is a private corporate disciplinary proceeding." "Is it?" Marcus asked, standing to his full height. Because for the past 3 weeks I've been working directly with federal transportation investigators building a case about systematic discrimination against minority pilots. Everything said in this room today is being recorded as evidence in that investigation. It was a calculated risk. While Marcus had indeed filed complaints with federal authorities and had been in contact with investigators, he had deliberately implied their involvement was more advanced than it actually was. He watched Preston and Veronica carefully, waiting for their reaction. The executive nearest Preston leaned over to whisper urgently in his ear. Veronica's hands trembled slightly as she shuffled her papers. "If there is some kind of investigation, which I doubt," Preston said carefully, "it's irrelevant to today's proceeding, which concerns your specific conduct and violations of company policy." Marcus pressed forward. "Ms. Harding, you just testified under oath that you've never targeted other minority pilots with similar accusations. Would you like to amend that statement before I present documentation of the 6 previous black pilots whose careers you helped end with nearly identical tactics?" Veronica paled visibly. I never said. I was simply reporting legitimate safety concerns. Like the concerns you expressed in emails to your uncle where you explicitly discussed strategies for removing pilots who didn't fit the traditional profile of Sky Nation aviators. Preston slammed his hand on the table. "This meeting is suspended pending legal consultation. Captain Washington, you are dismissed." "Actually, I'm not," Marcus replied with quiet authority. "Federal aviation regulations prohibit interference with an active safety investigation, which is what I've initiated regarding the falsification of flight documents by Ms. Harding. It was another calculated move invoking regulations that might not precisely apply, but creating enough uncertainty to keep the proceedings going." Marcus needed just a few more minutes. "This is preposterous," Preston sputtered, his composure finally cracking. "There is no investigation. This is a transparent attempt to—" The boardroom door opened, interrupting Preston mid-sentence. 2 men and a woman in business attire entered, displaying federal credentials. "Walter Preston? I'm Special Agent Davis with the Department of Transportation, Inspector General's office. These are Agents Patel and Rodriguez. We're here as part of an ongoing investigation into allegations of discriminatory practices and safety protocol violations at Sky Nation Airlines." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Marcus had indeed filed formal complaints weeks earlier, but hadn't known if or when investigators would respond. His gambit in the meeting had been designed to unsettle Veronica and Preston enough to reveal something incriminating before any actual intervention. The arrival of federal agents now transformed his strategy from desperate bluff to masterstroke. Preston's face flushed crimson. "This is a private corporate matter. You have no jurisdiction here." "Actually, we do," Agent Davis replied evenly. "Airlines operate under federal certificates and are subject to federal civil rights laws. We have warrants to seize specific records related to pilot evaluation and disciplinary procedures." As he spoke, additional agents entered with document boxes and digital forensic equipment. The Sky Nation executives looked to their legal counsel in panic while Veronica appeared on the verge of collapse. "Ms. Harding," Agent Patel approached her directly, "we'd like to ask you some questions about communications between you and Mr. Preston regarding pilot evaluation criteria and reporting procedures." Something in Veronica snapped. Perhaps it was the pressure of the moment, or the sudden realization that she might face federal charges for evidence tampering and false reporting. Whatever the cause, she made a critical error. "Uncle Walter only wanted to maintain standards," she blurted. "He said the quality of pilots had declined since they started pushing diversity quotas. We were just protecting the industry's traditions." The room fell silent. Preston stared at his niece in disbelief, while Marcus carefully controlled his expression. Veronica had just confessed to the conspiracy in front of federal agents and a room full of witnesses. Preston moved quickly to damage control. "My niece is clearly distressed and confused. Any conversations we had were about legitimate safety and performance standards, not race or gender." "Then you won't mind us reviewing your communications," Agent Rodriguez replied, producing a specific warrant for Preston's company devices and accounts. Preston's hand moved subtly toward his suit jacket pocket, where his phone was visible. Agent Davis noticed immediately. "Please don't touch your phone, Mr. Preston. Attempting to delete evidence would constitute obstruction." As federal agents began the process of securing documents and devices, chaos erupted in the boardroom. Executives huddled with legal counsel. Veronica began sobbing quietly, and Preston's face alternated between rage and calculation as he sought some way to salvage the situation. In the midst of this chaos, Veronica made her final play: desperation, driving her to self-preservation. "It was all his idea," she said loudly, pointing at her uncle. "He told me which pilots to target. He said it was for the good of the airline. I was just following orders from a board member." Preston's face contorted with fury. "You treacherous little—" He caught himself, aware of the federal agents documenting every word. Marcus Washington stood calmly in the center of the storm. He had created, watching years of systematic discrimination finally exposed to the light. The struggle was far from over. Legal battles would surely follow, and Preston's connections remained powerful, but the wall of silence had been irrevocably broken. As Agent Davis approached to take his formal statement, Marcus caught a glimpse of Ryan Miller standing just outside the boardroom door, witnessing the unfolding scene. Their eyes met briefly, and Ryan gave a slight nod of respect, a silent acknowledgement of the courage it had taken to stand against a system designed to crush individual resistance. Whatever happened next, nothing in commercial aviation would be quite the same again. 3 months later, Captain Marcus Washington stood in the cockpit of SkyNation Flight 1023, completing his pre-flight checks with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized his 20-year career. Outside the flight deck, windows, ground crews prepared the Boeing 787 for its journey from Boston to San Francisco, while inside the cabin, passengers settled into their seats unaware of the historic significance of this particular departure. This was Marcus's first flight as captain since the events surrounding Flight 657, an ordeal that had transformed not just his own career, but the landscape of commercial aviation itself. "External power connected, APU starting," reported first Officer Ryan Miller, who had specifically requested assignment as Marcus's co-pilot for this flight. The young pilot had emerged as an unlikely but steadfast ally throughout the turbulent aftermath of their shared experience. "Thank you, Ryan," Marcus acknowledged, his voice carrying the same quiet confidence it always had, despite all he had endured. The Department of Transportation had completed its initial investigation with stunning speed, uncovering evidence far beyond what even Marcus had compiled. Veronica Harding's public accusation against her uncle had opened floodgates, with numerous current and former employees coming forward once they realized federal protection was available. Veronica herself had been fired within days of the boardroom confrontation. Federal charges for evidence tampering and making false statements during a federal investigation were pending, with her attorneys desperately negotiating a plea deal in exchange for testimony against higher-level conspirators. Walter Preston had resigned from SkyNation's board to focus on personal matters, according to the press release. The reality, as industry insiders knew, was far less dignified. His other business interests were now under scrutiny from multiple federal agencies, with particular focus on his pilot training academies and their history of discriminatory admission practices. SkyNation Airlines found itself under a consent decree with the Department of Transportation, requiring comprehensive overhaul of its hiring, promotion, and disciplinary procedures. External monitors now reviewed all pilot evaluations and personnel decisions for evidence of bias, while mandatory diversity training had been implemented across all levels of management. Most significantly for Marcus personally, he had been not merely reinstated, but promoted to the prestigious position of Chief Pilot for Training and Standards, a role that gave him direct influence over the culture and practices that would shape the airline's future. "Captain Washington," came a voice from the cabin doorway. A flight attendant he didn't recognize stood with perfect posture, her uniform crisp and name tag reading, Christine Taylor. "Yes, Ms. Taylor?" Marcus responded. "All passengers are boarded, and we're ready for departure. Also," she added, setting a cup on the center console, "your coffee. Black with 1 cream, exactly how you like it, Captain." The simple courtesy spoke volumes about the changing culture at SkyNation. Word had spread throughout the crew network about what Marcus had endured, and the reforms his stand had triggered. This small gesture of respect indicated something far more significant than mere politeness. "Thank you, Christine," Marcus replied with a warm smile. As they completed final preparations for pushback, Marcus's phone chimed with a message, a rare event in the disciplined environment of his cockpit. Checking quickly before powering down the device, he saw it was from General Richardson. "Congratulations on your return to the skies, Captain. The President has signed the executive order establishing the Transportation Equity Commission. Your appointment as aviation sector representative will be announced next week. Well done, son." Marcus felt a surge of pride tinged with humility. The commission would have real power to address systemic discrimination across all transportation industries, from airlines to railways to shipping. His experience would help shape policies affecting thousands of transportation professionals for decades to come. "Everything all right, Captain?" Ryan asked, noting Marcus's momentary distraction. "Better than all right, Ryan," Marcus replied, powering down his phone. "Let's fly." As the powerful engines spooled up and the aircraft began its pushback, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The false accusation on Flight 657 had nearly destroyed his career, but instead had become the catalyst for industry-wide change. Zoe Williams had been reinstated with back pay and now headed Sky Nation's new diversity initiative, transforming her years of documenting discrimination into concrete reform proposals. The young IT specialist, Derek Simmons, had received federal whistleblower protection and a new position with the FAA's Systems Integrity Division. Most surprisingly, several white pilots had approached Marcus privately in recent weeks, sharing their own observations of discriminatory practices they had witnessed but felt powerless to challenge. The culture of silence was slowly giving way to one of accountability. "Sky Nation 1023, you are cleared for takeoff. Runway 22. "Right," came the controller's voice through their headsets. "Sky Nation 1023, cleared for takeoff 22 right," Marcus confirmed, advancing the throttles smoothly. As the aircraft accelerated down the runway, gathering speed for its ascent into clear blue skies, Marcus felt a profound sense of closure. The battle had left scars, certainly days and nights of doubt, personal attacks, and moments when victory seemed impossible. But in persevering, he had accomplished something far greater than merely saving his own career. The plane lifted gracefully into the air, climbing away from Boston Logan Airport, where just months earlier, he had been publicly humiliated and detained. Now he returned not as a victim, but as a pioneer, his vindication complete and his influence expanded beyond anything he could have imagined. Banking gently westward toward San Francisco, Marcus gazed out at the limitless horizon. For a black boy who had grown up staring at planes overhead, dreaming of someday commanding one, the journey had been longer and harder than it should have been. But today, that journey continued on a trajectory that would help ensure others faced fewer barriers pursuing the same dream. "Passing through 10,000 feet, Captain," Ryan reported. "Beautiful day for flying." "Indeed it is, First Officer Miller," Marcus replied with quiet satisfaction. "Indeed it is." As Sky Nation Flight 1023 climbed toward its cruising altitude, it carried not just passengers and cargo, but a powerful message about justice, perseverance, and the possibility of transforming even the most entrenched systems from within. For Captain Marcus Washington, the sky had never looked more limitless nor the future more promising. Justice, at long last, had taken flight. Captain Marcus Washington's journey teaches us powerful lessons about courage, systemic discrimination, and the power of principled resistance. His story shows that fighting injustice often requires extraordinary perseverance in the face of overwhelming opposition. When confronted with racism, Marcus didn't just defend himself. He exposed an entire system designed to exclude people based on race. The story highlights how discrimination often operates through seemingly legitimate concerns about standards and qualifications, when the real agenda is maintaining traditional power structures. Veronica and Preston's actions reveal how prejudice can hide behind professional protocols and corporate policies. We also learn the crucial importance of allies and evidence. Marcus succeeded because he methodically documented everything, built a coalition across racial lines, and secured powerful support. Ryan Miller demonstrates that being an ally sometimes means risking your own position of privilege to stand for what's right. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us that systemic change rarely comes from working quietly within broken systems. Real transformation often requires brave individuals willing to challenge the status quo publicly, even at great personal risk. Marcus could have taken the settlement and walked away, wealthy but silent. Instead, he chose the harder path of structural reform. The airline industry in this story represents many professional spaces where diversity is discussed, but discrimination persists. Marcus's victory wasn't just personal vindication. It created pathways for others facing similar barriers. Sometimes, the most important changes come when one person refuses to accept injustice as just the way things are. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in your workplace or stood up against unfair treatment? We'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Has anyone ever falsely accused you because of your race or background? Comment justice if you believe in fighting for equality in all professional spaces. If this story moved you or made you think differently about workplace discrimination, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about overcoming injustice. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement to stand up for what's right. Thank you for watching. Flight attendant accuses a black pilot of lying, then he makes one call and she's fired on the spot. Remember, real change happens when brave individuals refuse to accept discrimination as normal. Together, we can create workplaces and communities where everyone is judged by their character and competence, not by their color.